Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Day One Cricket Podcast. Today, I've got someone who I'm a bit nervous about speaking to because his vocabulary is much better than mine, even though I've grown up in England my whole life. He's an excellent Excel wizard, formerly, and now a host, presenter, you know, various things, learning, teaching. Anubhav, maybe give me the sort of 60-second investment banking intro into who you are and where people can find you.
I can do that, but before I do that, you put me under pressure because now I'll have to don my Shashi Tharoor hat. I'll have to utilize all the words that I've stored in this repository right here over the course of the next 60 minutes, and I'll try doing my best to do the same over the course of the next 60 seconds as well when I deliver this intro. Like you mentioned, I used to spend a lot of time in Excel and PowerPoint earlier because I was working in finance, in banking specifically when I was working at Deutsche Bank and then Goldman Sachs for a couple of years. And that life was drastically different compared to what life looks like right now. What happened was when I was in the US, I applied for my H-1B visa, which you have to do if you're an international in the US. All three of my attempts at getting the H-1B visa were unsuccessful, which is when I came back to my home country in India and felt that it might be an opportune time for me to pivot to something else, something that's in my wheelhouse, something that aligns better with my skills, my strengths, my interests. And that's when I thought about making the drastic pivot to becoming a sports presenter, which is how I currently ply my trade, along with doing some corporate hosting as well. And it's good to be having this conversation with you because like you, I'm a sports buff. That was also one of the primary reasons I was drawn to this profession. And I think nothing like it if you can actually turn your passion into your profession. And so I consider myself very lucky and very blessed to be doing what I love.
And I'm blessed to be speaking with you because if you hadn't done that, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. What were the nerves like when you've come back from India and you've decided I want to become a sports presenter? How did you sort of go through navigating that journey? What was the conversation like? How did you get into it?
Dude, it's funny you asked me that question because it's only recently that I've been reflecting a little bit. And I've been thinking that back when I got back from the US, this was middle of 2018, July of 2018, precisely when I got back from the US. I spent 6 months on the sidelines thinking about what my next move should be. And I was reflecting on what Anubhav was like back then. And I actually think that Anubhav back then was a lot more ballsy compared to what Anubhav right now is. Like I was daring. I was not afraid to go against the grain. I wasn't afraid to go against what society wanted me to do, or I guess what my background as an engineer had prescribed for me. And I wish I had the same balls now as I did back then. But it was nerve-wracking, to give you a short answer. It was very nerve-wracking. The 6 months that I spent on the sidelines were characterized by a lot of uncertainty that I was experiencing on a daily basis because I wasn't quite sure as to what to do next. I had one eye on sports presenting, but of course, like I said, my background, both in terms of my work experience as well as in terms of my educational qualifications, didn't quite lend well to a profession as a sports presenter. And so even if I harbored ambitions of breaking in, how exactly do I actually chart a course or a path for myself? Like, what doors do I knock on? Or how do I even get to those doors before I could even knock on them in the first place? But for lack of a better cliche, I think when you truly want something, you do actually end up finding a way. And what happened was I spent 6 months on the sidelines and I reached out to the usual suspects, the ESPN Cricinfos, the Star Sports, those major sports media companies in India as well as elsewhere. But unsurprisingly, I never heard back from any of them. They probably wonder, like, who is this guy, former investment banker at Goldman Sachs, doesn't have any media degree or any sports presenting experience, who thinks he has the wherewithal and the audacity to actually be knocking on our doors. But I didn't lose hope. But because time was running out and you've got to pay the bills, right? I ended up getting a job for myself at a fintech company, which was more aligned with my background. And this was a startup that I was working in Delhi. I did that for about 2 or 3 months and found myself absolutely miserable. And because of how miserable I was working in that startup, I just felt that Anubhav, come hell or high water, you just have to find a way for yourself strategically to enter the sports media industry. What happened was, this was the 2019 season of the IPL that was getting underway. And I was in Delhi, like I said, and Delhi Capitals, or they may have been Delhi Daredevils back then in 2019. They were playing matches at the Firozshah Kotla. I love having conversations with people. And I felt that, if I want to showcase my work to the sports media companies in order to actually make a better case for myself. I better go to the Firozshah Kotla and do some box pop interviews with folks who are lining up before the match as well as after the match to capture their raw emotions. And I would have done this anyway, even if I didn't have this ulterior motive in the back of my head. And so I went with a buddy of mine who served as a cameraman for me. And I started interviewing people before the match as well as after the match. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So that was one advantage. The second one being that I now had some ammunition in terms of having a body of work to showcase to these sports media companies. So I compiled those quicks, quickly edited them myself, and I sent across some of my work samples to the likes of ESPN Cricinfo, Star Sports, the same companies that I hadn't heard back from earlier. And as luck may have it, right before the start of the 2019 World Cup is when Ronak Kapoor, the principal presenter at ESPN Cricinfo, a very familiar face, very familiar name, he reached out saying, hey, we're looking for interns to join us during the World Cup because it's going to be very intensive, 2 or 3 months. In case you're interested, then would love to have an interview. So I got on a video call with Ronak. That went well. And he asked me, so when are you prepared to move to Bombay? And I said, I can come as quickly as possible. He said, okay, pack your bags. I want you here tomorrow, the following day. And I moved to Bombay the following day. I was living at my parents' friend's place. And then the day after that is when I had my first day on the job. And I was nervous. Seeing the studio, seeing the set, seeing all of these people. Sometimes you feel like an outcast as well. You feel like you have this imposter syndrome. But I met Ronak, I met the other guys, super chill people. I felt at ease. And yeah, I mean, bagged a presenting role during that World Cup. I wasn't supposed to come in as a junior presenter. I actually came in just as an intern. But they had an opening for a segment called Social Corner during each pre-match live show during that World Cup. So this was like a 2 or 3 minute segment where you were simply talking about everything that was doing the rounds in the world of social media pertaining to the match that was coming up. And I auditioned for that, luckily ended up getting that. And since then have gone on to work for other names in a full-time capacity as well as on a freelance basis. So that was sort of like the genesis. I know you asked for a 60-second story, and this was probably closer to 60 minutes, but I hope that I didn't end up boring you throughout the story.
No, it's always interesting to see how people get into places because you think investment banker and then sports presenter, like, you can't draw the lines, but it does make sense when you tell through the whole story. I think, what was that first day like when, Ronak Kapoor, you must have seen him on all of the Quick Info shorts that you're watching online and he's interviewing you, and you're there thinking, wow, this is so surreal. It's a presenter who I've looked up to and now he's interviewing me. I feel like like a Chris Gale or someone like that.
So
What was going through your mind?
it ended up being a very short conversation. It wasn't like an actual interview that you typically go through for a corporate job. Ended up being like a short conversation because I think in a lot of roles, especially as a sports presenter, what they're looking for is how well the other person communicates. What is the primary reason as to why this person wants this role? And so once they actually get a sense of what your why is, what the vibe is that you're emitting, then I think it takes them 5 or 10 minutes to actually sign off on a particular person. And so when I had that conversation with Ronak, I think it must have been like 5 or 7 minutes. I was nervous, obviously, going in. But like you said, like sometimes feels surreal. And I still remember after I had the offer in the bag, on the eve of my departure to Bombay, I was sitting with a couple of my cousins and we had gone for a drive in Delhi. And I was in a very reflective mood, not quite believing how I'd actually gotten myself where I'd gotten myself and feeling the sense of authentic pride as well. But obviously, that was just the start of the journey. And I couldn't quite hang my hat on the fact that I had this opportunity because the real work began there. But yeah, surreal for sure.
So you've done all these great things and then you do that and then you end up working for KKR, producing their content. How did that come about? And, was that something you were always planning to do? You thought, I want to work in the IPL team, I want to be in the bubble. And how did you try and sort of plan that out? Or was it something that just happened serendipitously?
Dude, I'll tell you what happened. So after the 2019 World Cup concluded, I was expecting to get a full-time offer from ESPN Cricinfo. But ESPN Cricinfo was going through some restructuring at that stage, because of which they had a hiring freeze. And they weren't able to hire anyone. I had a conversation with Ronak at the end of the World Cup, and he said, look, you've done solid work, but unfortunately, as luck may have it, because we're going through a hiring freeze at the moment, we can't quite hire anyone on a full-time basis. Crestfallen and disheartened, but I knew that it wasn't because of a lack of ability. And so that gave me confidence. I got this full-time job with a sports media startup right after that. And I worked at that startup for about 1.5 years. In fact, during the lockdown as well. It was a small company and it felt like me being a big fish in a small pond, which I think was perfect for someone who was relatively inexperienced because I was the lead presenter in a smaller company. And I think that did wonders for me in terms of me being able to hone my craft and just becoming better at the art of presenting. Because if you're working at a bigger company and you might be a small fish in a big pond, maybe you don't get as much exposure, you don't get as many opportunities, and you sort of have to play second fiddle to the lead presenter. But because I got that opportunity at that startup, I think I got a lot of hands-on experience as a lead presenter, which did my confidence, like I said, a world of good. That's when I felt, about a year and a half into working for that company, I felt that I feel I'm equipped in terms of the skill set to be gunning for something much bigger than this. And I reached out to Star Sports with my showreel that I'd updated. After that, reached out to Star Sports and shared my showreel with them. And they were auditioning for a role as a KKR insider. So there's this show, I think, which still exists. It's called Night Club, which is Star Sports' flagship property based upon KKR. And so KKR and Star Sports have this tie-up, and Star Sports handles the production of this KKR-themed show called Night Club. And Star Sports was looking for anchors, for KKR insiders who would actually be a part of the KKR camp throughout the 2021 season of the IPL and capture all the moments, all the interactions from inside the bubble. Hence the name KKR Insider. I did my audition, luckily got in, and that was my first big move, I'd say, in the field of sports presenting. That's when I felt that I was entering the big leagues, where the big boys play, working for Star Sports as well as working for KKR. Absolutely surreal experience. Loved it from start to finish. What happened during that IPL season, you might remember, because of COVID, the IPL got suspended as well. And so we had a phase 1, then a 2-month break in the middle, and then we had a phase 2. KKR were horrible in phase 1. I think they lost 5 out of 7 matches that we played. We may have been rock bottom or perhaps second from last during the first phase of the season. And the second phase is when there was this massive turnaround. We ended up winning 5 games out of the 7 that we played during the second phase of that season, somehow ended up entering the playoffs and then made our way to the finals as well. So I think that entire arc from where we were being down in the dumps to reaching the finals, unfortunately losing in the finals, but still being very respectable runners-up was superb. And personally for me, I just feel, when I first entered the camp, we were in quarantine for about 10 or 11 days. After we served our respective quarantine is when we were allowed to leave our hotel rooms. When I first left my hotel room, I remember entering the breakfast area where I saw all the KKR players. And that was the first day that all of us had actually finished quarantine. And seeing all of these guys in front of me, people that I have idolized growing up, people that I've watched on the telly growing up, felt surreal. I was starstruck when I first saw that scene. Absolutely starstruck. I see the likes of Dre Ras, Karun Nair, Owen Morgan, Dinesh Karthik, Brendan McCullum, who was the coach of KKR back then, and many other names that I'm forgetting right now. And I see all of them seated in the breakfast area chilling. And here I am seeing so many of my heroes from my childhood days right in front of me. And I'm going to be having interactions with them throughout the season. I'm going to be working with them throughout the season. So I had to pinch myself. But the one thing that I realized is that you might be starstruck, and it's very natural for you to be starstruck. But if you treat them as normal human beings, as fellow human beings, they are a lot more likely to actually open up. If you put them on a pedestal and give them this demigod status, which I think a lot of people do whenever they might be starstruck by like a more important person, I think it makes it awkward for the other person. Because the other person would not like to be treated like a demigod, unless, of course, that person has a super inflated ego. But most of these guys are just chill people who love to shoot the shit with you, who love to have conversations with you, who love to feel human. And there are plenty of other people, especially in India, who give them this godlike status, but sometimes they just want to have like a normal conversation with you. And I think that's something I realized very early on, which allowed me to have some of those organic exchanges with them on camera as well as off camera, when I used to see them during breakfast or when I used to see them at the gym. And that's something I've kept in mind even now, that if there is an important person, of course you respect that person, absolutely admire that person, but you don't necessarily have to start bootlicking or fawn over someone. There's a difference between respect and being a sycophant. And they're a lot more likely to open up to you as well, which makes it fun for them and makes it fun for you as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you do have guests, maybe on the podcast who are a bit bigger than you sort of think, I need to, be really kind to them. But then also at the same time, it's like, if someone did that to you, you'd think, I just want to have a normal conversation with this
Yeah,
person.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess, were there any sort of tips and tricks that you did, or was it just a mindset shift to say, that's Owen Morgan, that's Pat Cummins, how's it going? Or did you just meet them at the breakfast bar and say, would you like some eggs or something like that?
Mindset shift, but mindset shift brought about by them. Because when I used to sometimes greet them or initiate a conversation with them, I started noticing that they talk like any other human being and they don't necessarily have these airs about them. And so if they want to have like a genuine organic conversation with you and they're treating you at par with them, then you treat them the same way. And like I said, it just makes for a more comfortable exchange for them, as a result of which they're a lot more likely to open up when I might be interviewing them. And if I have that rapport with them off camera, I will have that rapport with them on camera as well. That's going to translate. You look at Gaurav Kapoor as an example. Like, he's an example that I continue using because I've learned so much from him in terms of like the art and craft of presenting. He's almost best friends with a lot of the guys who are experts on the shows that he hosts. The Zahir Khans, the RP Singhs, the Robin Uthapas, the Virender Sehwags, Manoj Tiwaris, and many others. He has a very good relationship with them off camera. And you can see that chemistry translating on camera as well. If he were treating them differently off camera versus how he treats them on camera, then there would be this discrepancy, this dissonance, as a result of which, you'd feel that something is off, that chemistry isn't quite there, or it seems fake, it seems contrived. But that's not the case. And so the best of relationships are actually built off camera. And I can say the same about what it was like in investment banking as well. In fact, the best of client relationships in a field like banking were actually built outside of the meeting room, say on a golf course. A client will never choose Goldman Sachs as its advisor because Goldman Sachs builds better models compared to a JP Morgan or a Morgan Stanley or a UBS. A client will do so because that client has a better relationship with the partners at Goldman Sachs or the MDs at Goldman Sachs. And those relationships, they're oftentimes built away or outside of the meeting rooms.
Yeah, and I think if you flip that back to yourself, if you think of all the businesses that you go to, am I more likely to go to a coffee shop where they know my name and know my order and we have a chat and talk about our day, or am I likely to go somewhere where they don't really make that effort? So you can kind of flip that in any part of your life and use that. That's what I think anyway.
Absolutely, dude. It's honestly connecting with people at a personal level. You connect with someone at a personal level, then the professional outcomes will take care of themselves.
Yeah, and there's a great interview that you did. I saw on your show reel with Sehwag, where he's pulling your leg. That was a really nice moment. And what was that like? Is that when you sort of knew that you've learned something from Gaurav Kapoor when that's happening? Is that sort of a lovely moment where your learning is actually happened in real life? How did you feel, or how do you try and generate those moments? Is it just by being your authentic self?
I think so. I think that definitely helped. So that was about a few weeks into my stint with Krigbuzz. I wasn't as comfortable on day one. But what helped was on day one, I had learned from the producers that Virender Sehwag, he's a very, very chill person. Very chill person. He's always going to help you on camera as well in case you need to be bailed out. Let's say you might be lost for words, or let's say you might be stumbling a little bit. Virender Sehwag will come in and help you. So he's one of those guys. But at the same time, if you are trying to be too clever, that's when Sehwag can actually put you in your place as well. And so with Viru, I just felt that, as long as I'm humble, as long as I come across as like a fan of the game, which I actually am, in other words, as long as I just be me without trying to get too clever, then I can probably bring out the best in Viru and have some of those moments like you alluded to. So, so I was nervous initially, but Veru is the type of person who completely puts you at ease. And like I said, I think a lot of that camaraderie, that chemistry took place in the green room when you have exchanges with those people while you're watching the match. So you ask them good questions that you're curious, that you're genuinely curious to get the answers to. You speak with them about their personal life without, of course, being too invasive or intrusive. And if they think that you're an authentic person and not a phony, then they will respect you and they will pay you back in kind with some of those moments that end up being very memorable for you.
That's great to hear. So speaking of memorable moments, when you were in the KKR camp, was there anything that you learned from these? So obviously they're just normal people, but they've obviously got something that makes them slightly different or have the edge in terms of a professional environment. Were there players that you saw that you took things from, and that in just the way they handle themselves and do things? Were there other players where you sort of saw there's different ways to be excellent at cricket, and how did you sort of take on board all of those learnings?
Before I answer that question, I really want to highlight this phrase that you used when you were framing your question. You talked about the fact that obviously they're normal people. And I think this needs highlighting because very often people on the outside lose sight of the fact that they're normal people. We look at them as these extraordinary human beings. But I keep coming back to a quote I heard Jamie Carragher once say on Monday Night Football. And he said, people don't understand that athletes are actually not extraordinary people, ordinary people who happen to have an extraordinary skill set. There's a difference. They're ordinary people who happen to have an extraordinary skill set. They have feelings as well. They have emotions as well. They are as insecure as you and I are. And that was an eye opener for me when I actually got to observe them at close quarters in the bubble and I was within touching distance of them. I used to see them at breakfast, at practice. And as someone who likes observing the body language of people and pays like keen attention to how people are coming, I noticed that these people are as insecure as anyone is because of some of the reasons that I mentioned. I think what separates them compared to, let's say, the average human is that, they've really homed in or zeroed in on this extraordinary ability that they've been given. Now, in terms of what makes them tick, the question that you asked me, different strokes for different folks. It differs from person to person. Like every single player has a very different pre-match routine to get them in the zone. Some people might be very chill, no super, nothing whatsoever, whereas others might have like a more disciplined or more regimented routine that sort of gets them in the zone before a match. Even at practice, when you observe them, some people might love to chew the fat, might love to have fun, whereas others are absolutely locked in the zone. And so over time, through trial and error, through lots of iterations, they've sort of understand what is it that brings out the best in them. And once they understand what is it that brings out the best in them, it's about replicating that and making sure that you're staying true to your process. And that's what I observed amongst all of the players. Something that really struck me, a story that I repeat so many times, only because I still sometimes feel in awe of this person, Owen Morgan, during that season, during the 2021 season of the IPL. He wasn't having the best of seasons as a batter. He was still doing well as a captain because, like I said, KKR reached the finals of that season, but he wasn't doing all that well as a batter. And there was a lot of pressure that was mounting on him thanks to the media, and people were questioning his place in the side. Yes, he's contributing as a captain, but he should be contributing as more than just a captain, as a batter as well. And he was going through a dismal patch. And I still remember this was towards the fag end of the season, and people felt that he should be dropped from the side and make Dinesh Karthik the captain of KKR. And Owen Morgan walks into a press conference before a match, and he's being bombarded with lots of questions about his place in the side. And Morgan, being the cool, calm, composed, phlegmatic customer that he is with ice in his veins, tells like the media that was gathered in front of him that the longer that my barren run continues, it simply means that the closer I am to getting a big score and to turning a corner. And I was in awe of the elite mentality that the likes of Owen Morgan and lots of these other cricketers possess. What 99% of the people out there would look at as a negative, somehow these guys have the mental powers, the self-hypnosis techniques to actually reframe a lot of these negatives as positives. Because when they can do that through this mental alchemy that I talked about, then it becomes much easier for them to move on versus staying stuck, brooding over some of the negative events that have taken place. And I think that, all else being equal, is what separates the men from the boys, the women from the girls, the pros from the rookies and the amateurs.
That definitely makes sense. So, is there anything? Do you take any of that into your preparation for hosting a podcast segment or anything, or hosting a workshop, for example? Are you sort of preparation and finding your own way of doing things? Are you trying to build that elite mentality in yourself?
Dude, I absolutely do. Not just in fact, but not just in hosting. I would say in the way I conduct myself in life, I am far from perfect. And I do not have the mental fortitude that someone like an Owen Morgan or a Virat Kohli or an MS Dhoni has. I do not. But I can say that I have improved substantially compared to what it was like, because I have drawn so much from the power of these examples, the likes of Owen Morgan, Virat Kohli, and many others that I talked about. The reasons why I went through a fitness transformation is because of Virat Kohli's example. Like, I used to be a big kid. I was 93 kgs coming out of college. And then I went through a radical fitness transformation. I'm not as fit now as I was at my peak, but still doing much better compared to what I was like when I was in college. And Virat Kohli was a big part of it. When I was in investment banking, I used to stress eat a lot. And what happened was, there was this one weekend, I was back at home, and I remember coming across this interview of Virat Kohli, and Virat talked about how fitness has not just led to a physical transformation, but it's completely reshaped how his mind works and his mentality. Like, he's become so much more optimistic about things in life, so much more confident when he's out there in terms of expressing himself. And he talked about how that one single habit that he developed has probably had the biggest transformation in his life. And that gave me a lot of inspiration. I started hitting the gym, went through a radical fitness transformation myself, and now I can attest to what Kohli mentioned. Now I've reached a stage where I'm not necessarily working out for the six packs, but I just know it gives me that feel good factor. When I do work out, all else being equal, I am a lot more confident when I'm speaking on air, on camera, or when I'm doing podcasts, either as a guest or a host. I just think I can express myself a lot better because I'm so comfortable and confident in my skin, because it gives me that feel good factor that supercharges a lot of my performances. So you understand yourself by actually doing these experiments on yourself. So you become your own lab rat, but you're also your own scientist, and you can draw inspiration from these examples. I'm not saying you blindly emulate them. You take what works for you, and then you end up discarding the rest.
Yeah, that's so important because lots of people, they see, you see loads of videos online. I did Virat Kohli's routine for a day and
Yeah,
things like that. And people don't understand that those routines are so highly personalized that Virat Kohli's probably got so many different things that we don't have, chefs, etc. So you can't copy that routine exactly. What you can do is
exactly.
say what's good and then take that and use that to make yourself feel better.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
speak about the Virat Kohli thing. There was a great story that you shared on actually getting to meet Virat Kohli. Maybe you can go into that, and that's probably for me that would be like a lifelong dream of mine to meet Virat. But how is it like for you? And talk us through the story because it's quite a nice story.
One of the best days of my life. One of the best days of my life. If right now you ask me to come up with a pecking order listing the best days of my life, I think that day would certainly be in the top five, perhaps the top three as well. Took place in April of 2022. So this is when I was working with CSK as an anchor cum producer. And we were all in Mumbai. The Trident Hotel, it's a famous hotel in Mumbai where CSK was staying. So that was our base. And just like the case was with, I was with the CSK camp during that season as part of the bubble, traveling with the team. The team had a practice session scheduled at the at the MCA grounds in Bombay. Again, like famous ground where a lot of IPL teams practice. So we came for a practice session. I used to travel with the team to practice for shoots, for interviews after practice, during practice. And we got to the stadium. And as we're entering the stadium, I see RCB buses parked there. And so the Virat Kohli fan in me was rekindled. And I'm like, there is a chance that I might end up encountering Virat Kohli. But then I didn't end up getting my hopes too high, because something similar had happened during the 2021 season of the IPL. There was this time when KKR and RCB were practicing together at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. And I went searching for Virat Kohli, only for me to learn that Virat, unfortunately, was not practiced during that session, because a lot of the times practice sessions are optional for some of the players. And so senior players might just end up taking a break. They might not come to practice. And so I was hoping it wasn't a repeat of that, and that this time Virat would actually be there. So we entered the ground, and no sooner had I entered the ground than I saw Virat from a distance, only because he's such a live wire. You cannot miss him. He isn't the biggest in terms of height, in terms of frame, but you just can't miss him because he's such a ball of energy. And he was there practicing in the nets. I darted like a child in a playground towards the nets, and I see Virat practicing there. He must have practiced for like 40 minutes, and I kid you not, I was there with my eyes fixated on Virat for the entire 40 minutes that he was practicing, because it was such a meditative experience for me, just watching the master in action from close quarters. He finished his nets, he went back to his camp, I went back to my half of the field, and then I just knew that, Anubhav, if Virat leaves the field and you don't get a chance to say hi to him or shake hands with him, I would not be able to forgive myself. And so that was also another one of the incentives that I had. Towards the end of practice, I see Virat packing his bags. And I just felt that, this is the hour of reckoning. This is the moment of truth. Anubhav, you've got to do something. And so I positioned myself very strategically on the field, hoping that if Virat were to walk back, if he were to leave the stadium, then I would actually intercept him near the gates and end up having my moment with.
Did you have Dhoni sort of ushering you around a bit finer and
No,
on
no.
the
So
field?
Dhoni must have been busy with his practice. And although I should have been focusing more on what CSK is doing, my eyes, like I said, and my attention was completely drawn to the RCB side of the field, specifically Virat Kohli. So I positioned myself very strategically, and I just felt that if I tell Virat, can I get a selfie with you? It would be a very ordinary moment, and I wanted to make it more special than just taking a selfie with Virat, because everyone can take a selfie with a big player, with a Virat Kohli. And so what I thought of was, I thought I'll actually get a picture of my fitness transformation ready on my phone, because Virat was responsible for that. And that fitness transformation, like I said, all else being equal, has unlocked a lot for me in life. And so I had that picture ready on my phone. I see Virat walking towards the exit. My heart is beating at the rate of knots because he's inching closer and closer to me. There was a security guard who was accompanying Virat. As soon as he's within earshot, I shout, "Virat!" The security guard quickly starts to stop me. But Virat himself looks at me and says, "Yeah." I said, "You mind if I show you something?" He's like, "No problem. Tell me." That's when I walk towards him. I show him that picture of the transformation and tell him that you have been responsible for this transformation, and you've been the biggest influence on my adult life, not just in terms of my physical makeup, but also in terms of my mental makeup, because of how much I've learned from you. He takes the phone from me. He takes a look at the transformation. He looks at me almost like a proud father would look at his son, and he says that, "Wow, congratulations, keep it up, man." And that's when I asked him, "You mind if I take a picture with you?" We took a selfie. He shook my hand again and he said, "Keep it up, champ," and he left. And after that, I had goosebumps. I couldn't quite believe what had just happened. It hadn't sunk in. In fact, for the next 24 to 48 hours, I was completely buzzing just thinking about that moment that I had with Virat Kohli, my biggest idol, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, and how else has Virat sort of shaped your mindset? You talk about it a lot. He's sort of your second father. Is there anything else that you've gleaned from him, and is there anything else that you sort of you thank him for?
Oh, how much time do we have? Because if let's do this.
But
Let's do this.
is it just the fitness, or is it his mentality? What about his mentality do you sort of try and take the most? Is it just the drive and the determination and the energy? Is that what you try and bring to your daily life?
Dude, it's so much more. And I'd love for you to chime in as well, because I know you look up to Virat Kohli just as much as I do. There are so many of his principles, the way he conducts himself in his life, the principled manner in which he goes about his business, not just as a cricketer, but as a human being, that I've picked up a lot from. He talks a lot about, and this is something that had influenced me a lot in 2017 and 2018. He talks a lot about, if I give my 120% on a daily basis, answerable to no one. And the way I interpreted this is that as long as I know I am leaving absolutely no stone unturned in terms of the effort that I'm giving, and I'm giving my 120% on a daily basis, then I am answerable to no one. In other words, I can be satisfied and I can look at myself in the mirror before going off to sleep, knowing that, you know what? I gave it everything out there because the effort is the only thing that you can control. The results you cannot control. MS Dhoni talks about this as well. Trust the process. As long as you trust the process and as long as you're committed to the process with utmost honesty and sincerity, the results will take care of themselves. And that's something I learned from Virat. He talks a lot about being completely committed to your craft, and he says that if I respect my field, which is cricket, cricket would also respect me back. That's one of the reasons why you will never see Virat Kohli not giving it his absolute best on the field, even if the game might be completely lost and it's the last ball of the match. But if he can save a few runs for his team on the boundary line by putting a dive in, he will do that. Other cricketers might not do it because they might feel that what's the point of my effort? That the game's already gone to the opposition. It's already lost. But that's Virat's way of respecting the game that has given him so much. And he knows that if he respects cricket, cricket will also respect him back by giving him all the awards, the accolades, the honors that he's achieved in his career. Something else that I've learned from Virat Kohli that not too many people, in fact, talk about is Virat has actually really made me realize that your life is very short and you have to give your absolute best on a daily basis because your life is short. If you think about a cricketer's life, how much is it? Like, what's the duration or what's the span of a cricketer's career? 15 years, 20 years at most, max. If you're like a Virat Kohli or a Sachin Tendulkar. And that's very short in the grand scheme of things, if you think about it. Like most other professions, you can work for like 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. But a cricketer's career, 15 years, 20 years. Or an athlete's career, very short, which is a very small fraction of, let's say, 70, 80, 90 years that an average human might live. And so it's going to be over before you know it. And knowing that it's going to be over before you know it, how can you not? How can you not leave everything, every ounce of energy on the field? Because when you're 36, when you're 37, like Virat Kohli is right now, and when you're hanging up your boots, like Virat Kohli did recently in the test format, you don't want to feel as if, you know what, I could have done more. Like I'm not spent. You want to feel absolutely spent knowing that I could not humanly and possibly have given more than I did. So many of these, and I've barely scratched the surface in terms of principles, learnings, values, ways of conduct that I've picked up from Virat Kohli. And I'm sure you probably have more up your sleeve as well that I'd love to discuss in case you have any specific ones on your mind.
I think it's just the intensity that he does everything with. That's what I take from him. So sometimes if I don't really feel like doing much, I'll sort of say, read a book or something. I'll be like, well, actually, you know what? I've only got today. I might as well just give it everything for the next hour. Because what would Virat Kohli do basically? And then you can sort of go back to that and say, at least you've got a framework for someone who you can say, they're doing that, so I've got to do it as well. So it's kind of good accountability knowing that there's someone out there who's always pushing themselves.
Dude, I love
And
that. Because one of the questions that I oftentimes ask myself whenever my intrinsic motivation might be leaving a lot to be desired, I sometimes pose this question to myself: what would Kohli do? I actually pose this question to myself. And when you visualize or when you put yourself in someone else's shoes, I know that Kohli would be getting up and hitting the gym right now. Or I know Kohli would be reading a book right now. Or I know Kohli would be spending quality time with family right now as opposed to scrolling social media. So when you look at it from that perspective, through that lens, what would Kohli do? Just like you said, I think that can serve as a massive shot in the arm. And all of a sudden, that person becomes a massive source of motivation for you that sort of compensates for the lack of intrinsic motivation that you might be experiencing.
yeah, it's just like systems, and then having someone like that, it puts it all together and makes sure that you can't really miss days. I mean, everyone has days where they don't, do everything at 100%, but just having those sort of frameworks in your mind from sports people who actually have to get up every day and perform, it is very useful. So that's what I took from Virat. But I think Virat is, yeah, he's just a force of nature. I just think getting up every day and really going hard, and what I admire most is actually his mindset to know that the game is bigger than him, because even you saw his IPL speech, and you saw in the last test match when he was sort of doing the sandpaper stuff with he sort of knew that, the game needed some more theatre, and he was always
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
bring it. And even Athers says on his thing, he says, and Nas, they say that the game will be much worse with Virat Kohli, because he knew that whilst his job is to perform with the bat, he's also sort of part of the entertainment package, and him being Virat Kohli will bring so much more to the game, because the camera was always fixed on him. That's what I don't think I've ever seen that with any other player, where the camera just, wicket, let's go see Kohli,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
good ball, let's go see Kohli, and it's just amazing.
Dude,
But
he's absolutely box office. And look, that's one of the reasons why you watch the game as well, for the entertainment that the game provides. That's one of the reasons why people were so drawn to someone like a Shane Warne, because he was absolutely box office as well. And the reason I personally would regard Shane Warne higher than a Muralidharan, even though Muralidharan's taken more wickets on paper compared to a Shane Warne, is because Shane Warne, along with being an absolute ridiculously good cricketer, was also a top class entertainer. And there was never a dull moment when you were watching Shane Warne, because of his theatrics, because of his sense of theatre. You talked about Virat Kohli. Shane Warne had something similar. You look at someone like a Rishabh Pant right now. He has that as well. And that's why you're drawn to these characters for more than just their cricketing abilities. They're more than just cricketers. They're superb personalities that you're hooked to.
yeah, and it's amazing that they kind of know that as well. I think deep down they must know it. Did you
Yeah,
ever
yeah.
get a sense from, like, speaking to come in, speaking to Dhoni, did they know that, did Dhoni know that he was Captain Cool, and did he sort of live up to that persona, or was he just always like that in everything he did? Were there some players who were like, I need to go out and perform today? Did you ever have any conversations like that with any of the KKR CSK boys?
Maybe Dhoni and Pat Cummins not so much, but then there are definitely other cricketers out there who have this performer in them. They love to perform. They're almost like exhibitionists. Part of the reason why they love the public persona, all the fame and everything that comes with it, is because, it leverages the performer in them. Because like I said, they're larger than life personalities. And that's why they draw the eyeballs off the field as well. Dhoni and Pat Cummins, they've got very captivating personalities as well. But I'd probably say they're different compared to someone like a Shane Warne, compared to someone like a Virat Kohli. They're very unassuming. They keep a low profile. Dhoni specifically, a man of very few words, did not talk all that much. I used to see him during practice sessions, at the breakfast table, in the hotel. I never saw him talk all that much. But he still had this very magnetic presence, just by virtue of being Dhoni. Like, you could see that he's so self-assured. He doesn't necessarily need to be the loudest or the most vocal in the room to make his presence felt. That's the aura that someone like a Dhoni had. But because he's a man of few words, whenever he actually spoke, people did listen, because he only spoke when he actually had something solid to share with the team. And so the gravity of his words, the importance of his words, the significance or the weight of his words was very high. And so that was Dhoni for you. A very different personality compared to someone like a Virat Kohli, but equally charismatic, equally appealing to everyone. And I was always more of a Kohli person. I mean, it's not either or, but if someone told me which of the two can you relate to more, I would say that Virat Kohli would be my answer, because my personality is more similar to Virat Kohli's personality compared to MS Dhoni's personality. But those 2 or 3 months in the CSK bubble, observing how MS Dhoni goes about his business on as well as off the field, really, really increased my level of respect and admiration for the great man. He's absolutely what people make him out to be: cool, calm, composed, phlegmatic. Like I said, is a man of few words, but when he talks, like, people absolutely listen. He's also someone who loves to keep things very simple. There's a story that I've related on my Instagram. I'm not sure if you've come across it. Might be worth repeating. So we were in the bubble then, because we still had like the COVID cloud hanging above us. We were in the bubble, and there was a barber that was assigned to us in the bubble if players needed to get haircuts or needed to get their beards groomed. And there was this one time when I went to the barber, and I was having a conversation with the barber, just asking him about like some of the exchanges that he's had with the players, when he's cutting the hair or when he's grooming their beards. And the barber tells me that most of the players, especially because the young players, style is a big aspect of their profile, their brand as a whole. Most of these players have these very exotic tastes in terms of what's sort of fancier. And Dhoni's like, bas chote karte. And I think that one story is really emblematic of the personality that MS Dhoni has and how he loves to keep things very simple. And just because he loves to keep things simple does not mean he's a simpleton. Because simple is very sexy as well. Because oftentimes in today's day and age, with big data being pervasive, we sometimes end up overcomplicating things. But Dhoni likes to keep it simple, not just off the field, but on the field as well, in terms of his decision making. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people say that he's someone who really trusts his gut. He goes with his gut instinct. Now, he might end up getting it wrong 3 times out of 10, but then 7 or 8 times out of 10, he ends up getting it right. And your judgment or your gut instinct, that's also like self-correct.
Yeah.
So you might end up getting it wrong previously, but then your judgment improves based upon the sample set that you're accumulating as you're making more and more judgment calls and decisions. And that's how MS Dhoni has really, really honed his decision-making framework, which allows him to take those calls driven by his gut during high pressure situations on the field.
Yeah, and you talk about the AI. I actually spoke to a sports bettor, and he sort of said there's so many intangibles in the game that people bet on. That's probably what Dhoni's doing. He's got all of these intangible things that are happening on the field in his head where the fields are placed. And he's got that in his brain because he's lived all these experiences which data can't tell you. So it's super interesting that you say that he just trusts his gut.
Yeah, dude. I'm not sure if you've come across this podcast, this new podcast between Joss Butler and Stuart Broad.
Yeah,
So
it's very good.
I've really taken to it like a fish to water, and I'm loving the chemistry between the two of them. I love the fact that, they keep things very light. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because recently I came across a YouTube short, and Butler was talking about how he thinks matchups, data, analytics, all of this is a wee bit overrated. Now, there are different schools of thought, but Butler mentioned a very good point. He said data doesn't necessarily have to be numbers. Data is more than just numbers. Data can be qualitative as well. And I think that's what MS Dhoni utilizes. He isn't necessarily sitting with a data analyst on the eve of a match, going through graphs and charts and numbers and statistics. He's not doing any of that. But he's taking in a lot of quantitative as well as qualitative data based upon what he's observing on the field. And that's how his unique data model has been built. So it's not necessarily numbers, because sometimes we feel data is synonymous with numbers. And I think Butler put it across in a very good way and used the phrase game intuition. Game intuition.
No, that's definitely interesting. Before I ask about how you met Dhoni, because I know that's a great story, there's something that I really want to know is that when you're in the bubble, do you feel like part of the team and that you have something to contribute to the success of the team? And how do you sort of level that with doing your job? Do you feel like there's a responsibility on you to also try and get the best out of the players as well?
So that's not your job. So if you're part of the media team, all you're entrusted with is making sure that on the media front, you're doing your absolute best job possible. So you don't have any role to play in terms of enhancing the performance of the players. And you, of course, feel part of the family. So when I was working with KKR or when I was working with CSK, I felt a part of the family. You feel included and the players treat you well. They greet you warmly. And like I said, you feel a part of the overall ecosystem. But then at the same time, you have to understand that you have been given a specific role. And you can't be getting too pally with the players, or you can't be exploiting the role that you have been given. Just because you're in that environment, that doesn't mean you end up becoming a try-hard and try to curry favor with the players or get too warm and cozy with them. So you know your limits, you know where the boundaries are. At the end of the day, you're there to do a good job as a professional. You aren't just there to shoot the shit and have fun throughout. Of course, that's a part of the process, but you understand what your role is, you carry out your role, and you respect the space and the privacy of the other cricketers.
That makes sense. But then so you go through a bad spot or a good spot, do you feel that vibe in the team? Do you feel that vibe yourself or as the media team? Because obviously when teams, we've all played in teams, when the team's going well, everyone's really pally with each other. There's no arguments. Everyone's having a great time. Do you feel that in the media team as well, or is it somewhat distant and cut off from that?
Do 100%. You absolutely do. Because if you're very much a part of the same ecosystem and you're at arm's length from all of these guys, the emotions are very contagious. They're very infectious. Let's say I've done a fun shoot with a cricketer and we've recorded that shoot. The team's just lost. The media team will not be putting out that fun shoot right after a loss. So we'll wait for the perfect or the opportune moment. Let's say the spirits are high, the fans are actually talking about the team and in seeing the team in positive light. That's when you put out a fun shoot. So you need to have your finger on the pulse, the fans' pulse, as well as the pulse of the entire team. What CSK did brilliantly, and I think this is something that KKR did brilliantly as well during the first phase of the IPL, when the team was going through a dismal run. Even when the chips were down, or even when the performances weren't quite up to the mark, the coach and the captain, in the case of KKR, Brendan McCullum and Owen Morgan, in the case of CSK, Stephen Fleming and MS Dhoni, they did a fantastic job at ensuring that the players' heads and shoulders don't drop. The environment is still a fun one where we don't end up taking ourselves too seriously. And I truly believe, you talked about some of the intangibles. I truly believe that you can have the most talented, the most skillful players in the world. But if the environment of the team isn't quite one where players feel the sense of psychological safety to just go out there, express themselves and be themselves, then you can have the best 11 players assembled, but the team will be lesser than the sum of its parts. On the other hand, you have a setup that's conducive in terms of allowing people to express themselves, have fun, and the team is bonding. Even when the performances might not be all that good, it's only a matter of time before the team turns a corner and the performances improve, because when the team is really bonding, then the team is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think Brendan McCullum, Stephen Fleming, MS Dhoni, Owen Morgan, people who have bags of experience in man management, which is very important. That's how you bring out the best in these players. These guys know how to keep the environment cool and relaxed, even when the performances might not initially be going in the team's favor.
And that's a great set of people to actually sort of see in action. McCullum, Dhoni, etc. They're some of the best coaches in the history of the sport. So that's excellent. I guess, which was the funnest shoots that you did throughout KKR? And okay, which was one that stands out to you? Was there anyone that you thought, wow, that was really surreal? You know, I got to really have a good time with a professional cricket player, and we just had a lot of fun. Perhaps not a big name, might be a big name, but is there anyone that stands out to you?
So there were plenty of them. So I'm going to be thinking out loud right now. One that comes to my mind is a shoot that I done with Robin Uthappa. So this was during my first week in CSK, and Robbie was playing for CSK back then. And I remember I was nervous because Robin Uthappa's a massive name. But I kid you not, that interview, which was supposed to go for 30 minutes, or that's the time slot that was allotted, went on for about an hour and 15 minutes because of how free flowing and seamless the conversation was, which is a testament to Robin Uthappa and his conversational abilities. He's a guy who loves to express himself, not just on the field, but off the field as well, as a conversationalist, as a personality, as a human being. And I always call it an interview in quotations, only because it did not feel like an interview. It felt like a conversation. And even though I was meeting him for the first time, it seemed to me as if I've known him for years, which is a testament to his very warm and genial personality. And we instantly hit it off. I used to see him subsequently throughout the course of the season at the gym, on the field, and we had that rapport throughout. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I was able to get Robin Uthappa on my podcast as well, because there was this personal, organic relationship that had bloomed from day one because of how genial Robin Uthappa is as a personality. So that's one that definitely comes to mind. I have to think about my first one when I was at KKR. My first interview, I'll tell you what happened. We left quarantine. We left our hotel rooms. I talked to you about that experience when I entered the breakfast room. I saw all of those cricketers, and while I was having breakfast, I was told by a couple of producers, "Are you ready for an interview? We have Shubman Gill and Dinesh Karthik lined up, two big names." And I was supremely nervous But then, pressure is a privilege. You remind yourself that the people who'd kill to be in the position that you are in. And I said, yes, I'm ready. Let's go for it. And then they took me to a meeting room, a conference room in their hotel. We were at the Taj in Mumbai itself. Sorry, at the ITC in Mumbai. And I see Shubman there. I see DK there. I shook hands with both of them. I was shaking before I asked my first question. But as soon as you get off the mark, I asked my first question. I felt at ease because that interview went well, a short one, 10 or 15 minutes, but because it went well and with two big names, that gave me a lot of confidence going into the rest of the season as well when I was doing a lot of interviews. Another one that comes to my mind, there was a round table with all-rounders that we had done. So part of that round table was Shakib Al Hasan, Dre Russ, Venkatesh Iyer. So three big names. Venkatesh Iyer was performing really well as well that season. That was like his breakthrough season.
Breakout season number 3, yeah.
Breakout
He was
season. You see someone like unbelievable. You see someone like a Shakib Al Hasan, absolute legend of the game. Dre Russ, absolute legend of the game. And I enter the conference room and I see the three of them sitting there. I remember saying something funny during my opening sentence. I remember saying something along the lines of, in school, I always wanted to be an all-rounder, or I always wanted the all-rounder prize in school, but I never got that. But the closest that I've come to getting that prize is having this round table with three magnificent all-rounders, something like that. And it just got a chuckle out of them. And once you see these guys chuckling, once you say some of these quirky things by being completely yourself, as opposed to acting out of character, trying to be someone you aren't, like a Harsha Bhogle or someone, then I think they see that and then they warm up to you and they open up to you. And I think that helps a lot. So these are some of the ones that come to my mind. Apart from that, there were lots of exchanges off the field as well. I used to see Ravindra Jadeja at the gym nearly on a daily basis when I was in the CSK camp, nearly every single day. And super chill guy, no airs about him, very unassuming, very humble. He'll have a conversation with you like you're one of his friends. And, having those moments with him at the gym where we just like chat whenever he might be taking a break or I might be taking a break, it makes your day. Some of those 2-minute exchanges that you might be having with some of these massive celebrities. And they earn a lot of your respect as well because of like the treatment that they give to you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's the age-old adage, treat people how you want to be treated. With Jadeja, did he in the gym, was he, with the weights practicing the sword? Is that what he did to make it so good? Or
maybe he was practicing his mobility, his flexibility and agility such that he can actually dish that out on the field in the impeccable manner in which he does so.
No, that's always a joke. It's like, does he practice that, or is it just something he's naturally good at? So no, it's definitely cool.
There was this, another one comes to my mind. There was this IG live that I'd done with Pat Cummins. So when we were in quarantine, I'd done a few IG lives from the KKR handle with a couple of cricketers. So I'd done one with Harbhajan Singh, I did one with Pat Cummins, and I did one with Shakib Al Hasan. Like three massive names, all three legends of the game. And all three were memorable for very different reasons. But the one that I did with Pat Cummins is very close to my heart. Another gem of a bloke. Absolute gem of a bloke. When I was having that conversation with him, it didn't feel as if I was the only one asking questions. Like he was actually curious to know about me. He was responding to the fans as well, who were asking questions as part of the live chat. And since then, I had shoots with him in person, not just via IG Live. Super cool bloke. Love the guy. Superb mentality towards life, not just towards cricket, but towards life as well. He understands what his priorities are, and we can actually talk about that if you'd like. And because I built that relationship with him, I was able to get him on my podcast as well, which came as a massive surprise to me. Like he's the bloody captain of the Australian cricket team. He's a massive name, like probably amongst like the top 10 biggest names in world cricket at the moment. If you think about what he's achieved, what his stature is like, what his reputation is as a cricketer. But I was surprised when this happened. This was between the first and the second phase of the IPL. We were all sitting back at home because of COVID. Pat Cummins had just started his YouTube channel, and a friend of mine texted me telling me, Anubhav, you might want to invite him for a chat on your channel. And I just felt that there's absolutely no way Pat Cummins is going to come for a chat on my channel. He's got better things to do. But then I thought, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So why not shoot him a text? I asked for his number from another KKR cricketer, whose number I had. I got his number, texted him, and lo and behold, somehow he responded to me, and we had the 30-minute exchange. And even now, there are times when I might text him. Let's say if he's achieved something, I might congratulate him. He recently came out with a book, and I've read his book cover to cover, and I told him how good his book was. And even now, he takes the time out to sometimes just respond to me, saying thank you. And I think it's a testament to the class act that Pat Cummins is.
So now when you introduce yourself, you say Pat Cummins, friend of the show, or you call him Cummo, which I think is very nice. I saw the interview you did after you had him on, and you were saying not quite Cummo or Pat Cummins, but I think you was your sister on after, so it was a very sweet interview actually. I don't know how much time you have left. Maybe sort of one final question. Talk me through meeting MSD, because that's what, that was a great story as well. Similar to the Virat Kohli story in some ways, but talk me through the rigmarole of how you got that and how you made that for yourself.
Similar. So I left it for the 11th hour because the season was nearly over. This was the penultimate day of the season, IPL 2022. And MS Dhoni, because he's a very private person and because there are so many people who want his attention, want his time, want to take selfies with him, autographs with him, he's protected by CSK. And so you typically will not get a chance to get a moment with MS Dhoni. Or even if you might see him at practice, then there are lots of other players who are trying to pick his brain. So you won't get that moment with MS Dhoni. So the entire 2.5, 3 month season had gone by. We had reached the penultimate day of the season. And I just felt that, if the season ends and I don't end up having even a 2-minute exchange with the great man, I won't be able to forgive myself. Like, it's going to be a real travesty. And a lot of my friends, family members back home kept asking me on a daily basis, like, have you met Dhoni? Have you met Dhoni so far? And I just felt I'm going to be embarrassed if I tell them that, I spent 3 months in the same hotel as MS Dhoni, but I never even had a conversation with him. And I left it late, but better late than never, as the cliche goes. This was the second last day of the season. Like I said, we were all in our hotel rooms. This must have been around 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. And CSK was playing a match on that day in Mumbai, right around the corner at the Brabant Stadium, not too far from the Trident Hotel where we were. And so the team typically departs for the stadium around 6 p.m. and the match starts at 7:30 p.m. We were all in the hotel. After lunch is like a quiet period where the players might be relaxing in their respective rooms. People might be taking a nap. So that's when I felt was my best opportunity to perhaps get a moment with MS Dhoni. I was colluding with one of the hotel staff members, and he knew that I harbored ambitions of meeting MS Dhoni. So this was around 2 p.m. or 3 p.m., like I said, and he comes to my room saying, MS is in his hotel room. It's now or never. In case you want to meet him, you can go now. We were given strict instructions. The content team were given strict instructions that you cannot approach MS Dhoni. But whenever there's something I really want to do, but I might be breaking the rules in a bit to do so, there's something that I remind myself, something that I learned from Tim Ferriss that I often remind myself of, which is that if it's something that you really want to do, don't seek permission. Instead, ask for forgiveness later. And so that's the mantra that I had. I'm not going to seek permission. If need be, I'm going to ask for forgiveness after I've committed the crime. And I mustered up the courage to go to his floor, which was a different floor compared to my floor. I exited the elevators. I looked to my left. I looked to my right. I see that the coast was clear. And then on my tippy toes, I walked towards MS's room. I knock on his door. There's someone else who here. So I wrote a letter where I paid a tribute to MS and how big of an impact that he's had on my life and on my mental makeup. And so I said, Dhoni sir ko ye letter dena hai. So then he opened the door. I entered, and MS, being the simple person that he is, he was playing board games, because I learned later that that's his way of relaxing on the day of a match. So in the few hours leading up to a match, he's just there relaxing, playing these board games, and he's having fun with his inner circle. And I walked towards him. MS, I'm part of the content team. I'm the anchor of CSK. I just wrote this letter because you mean a lot to me and you've had a massive impact on my life. And then he gets up from his chair. He takes the letter, shakes hands with me, and thanks me. And that's when I ask him, you mind if I take a picture with you? And he said, sure, not a problem whatsoever. I hand over the phone to the person who opened the door, take that picture with MS, go back to my hotel room, not quite believing what's happened. within a few minutes of having reached my hotel room, I get a call from this guy, part of the CSK administration, absolutely lambasting me for having had the audacity to go to MS's room, knock on his door, take a selfie. But like I said, once I had the selfie and once I had the moment in the bag, I couldn't have cared less. The season was anyway coming to an end. And I just sought forgiveness as opposed to having sought permission, because I know had I sought permission, I would have never been granted permission.
And you wouldn't have met Dhoni, so I think, yeah, I'm definitely going to take that in mind. If I ever get the opportunity to meet a famous cricketer, I'm definitely going to say I'm going to go for it, regardless of what the staff tell me. But thank you for coming on the show, Anubhav. It's been great. I guess what's next for you, Anubhav? What are you doing? Where can people find you? Maybe we go into that a little bit.
100%, dude. So just marching on in life, in addition to doing sports presenting work, I'm also trying to build a business around communication skills and soft skills in India. And I think my profession as a presenter, as a host, complements this aspect or this endeavor of mine. So that's something that's keeping me busy. And it's good having these conversations, because we're talking about things that we both, you and I, love. And so this doesn't seem like a podcast or an interview. It just seems like you having a conversation with one of your mates at the pub with a couple of pints in hands. So I appreciate you actually inviting me for this chat. I thoroughly enjoyed it from start to finish. It didn't feel as if, we've spoken for 1 hour, 15 minutes. So hopefully this was as engaging for you as it was for me, and hopefully the first of many more conversations that we have going forward as well.
No, I always love hearing cricket stories, so it was great for me as well. And I'll sign off with, as a great man once said, keep it up, champ, and have a nice day.
Thank you so much, dude. It shows that you were paying rapt attention, and I love that. Cheers, mate.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much. Take care.